Understanding social problems. What is a social problem? So, we've defined social problems as conditions or patterns of behavior that people believe requires public concern and collective action in order to bring about change. But as we read earlier, nothing is or is not automatically a social problem. There is a huge disagreement in politics and society over whether certain problems are social, thus requiring public concern and action, or individual, and something that is the fault and/or the responsibility of the person affected by the condition. While not perfect, there are certain things that make people more likely to accept any given issue is a social problem. We can call these the characteristics of social problems. Below, we will go over each in more detail. The first, a social problem exists when there is a sizable difference between the ideals of a society and its actual achievements. What this means is that there is a gap between the way things are and the way we feel they should be. This characteristic depends on the collective ideals and values of any society. Take child poverty, for example. According to Statistics Canada, about 17% of all children in Canada live in poverty. Now, even though many people would disagree on the cause and solutions for this, and some might even question how the definition of poverty is reached by Statistics Canada, the fact is nearly 1 in 5 children in Canada are poor, and this is something that a significant proportion of the population thinks is unacceptable. Something should be done. This is what makes it a social problem. Any issue only becomes a social problem when people have been able to convince others that it is an issue that requires public action, public attention, and collective action. There are countless problems in all societies. Any issue can only reach the level of social problem when people who care about the issue have been able to convince the broader public that it is an issue that requires public attention and collective action. We call these people claims makers. Claims makers are the individuals, groups, and organizations that seek to inform the public about the extent and nature of a particular problem. There are countless claims makers trying to bring attention to various issues. Examples include politicians, activists, business and corporate groups, NGOs, educators, and lawyers. The extent to which the public picks up on any one of these narratives will determine whether a given issue is treated as a social problem. This brings us to the next point. People with power and exposure are often more successful at bringing issues to public attention. What this means is that some people, groups, and organizations can more successfully bring any issue to the public's attention. Those who are more often in the public eye have a larger platform from which to inform us about the extent or nature of a given problem. Politicians, for example, can often bring up the issues they or the people they represent care about. But celebrities also benefit from being able to reach and influence more people. How often do we see celebrities using their fame to bring attention to specific problems to their many fans and followers? This is important because it shows us that the problems that get the most attention are not necessarily those that affect the most people or those that do the most damage. Rather, the idea of claims makers and the greater access people with power have to the media and the public means that certain issues are more likely to be taken up as social solely due to the status of those promoting them. Thus, social problems are determined not just by the number of people they affect, but by how they affect us. Traditional definitions of social problems claim that a problem is social if it affects a large number of people. While this is a factor, it is not the only consideration. What is far more influential is the extent to which any issue affects our given sense or our sense of right and wrong. Some things actually affect a very small number of people, and yet they are considered so heinous and so contrary to our values that time, attention, and resources are devoted to responding to or preventing their occurrence. In most provinces in Canada, we're familiar with Amber Alerts, the messages put out when a child is suspected to have been abducted. Additionally, from a young age, children are taught to be careful of strangers. Many parents are concerned to allow young children out alone, and schools and other institutions have policies in place to safeguard children from abduction. The thought of any child being abducted is horrific. But we also know that most children who go missing have run away. And most who have been abducted have been so by a non-custodial parent or family member. The actual number of children in Canada who are kidnapped by strangers every year ranges between about 9 and 13 in all of Canada. Does this mean, however, that it's not a real problem, that it's not a social problem, and that nothing should be done to prevent or combat this? Of course not. Social problems depend on the amount of attention that is brought to a particular issue, but also on how much any issue affects our sense of right and wrong, how much it horrifies us. But what is perhaps most crucial in establishing whether any given issue is a social problem or not is demonstrating that the causes and solutions to that problem lie outside of the individual. When the causes and solutions for a problem lie outside the individual, we can say they are located in the social structure.